In June 2023, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot 34 times outside of his place of worship in Surrey, British Columbia. What followed was a diplomatic disaster that shattered the relationship between Canada and India.
Indian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
That murder is now in pre-trial proceedings, but the government of Canada is working to keep certain details of the case secret in order to protect their diplomatic relationships and national security. Those details, which Nijjar's supporters say will implicate the government of India in his murder. There are some vital questions surrounding this case. Was Hardeep Singh Nijjar a beloved community leader or dangerous terrorist? Was India directly involved in killing a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil? And can there be justice when the facts of the case carry global diplomatic implications? Let's start with something we know for sure. Nijjar was killed because of his involvement with the Khalistan movement. Simply, the Khalistan movement is the idea that a sovereign homeland should be established for Sikh people, centralized in the state of Punjab in India. The origins of this idea go back to at least the 1800s, but the modern movement reached its peak in the mid-20th century. In the late 1970s, the movement turned violent. Increasingly militant Sikh extremists began launching violent operations, killing civilians and government officials. In the 80s, they took the Gold Temple, the holiest Sikh Gurdwara, as their home base, stockpiling weapons and carrying out deadly attacks. In June 1984, then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi ordered Operation Blue Star, sending in the army to remove them. After 9 days, officially hundreds were dead, although Sikh leaders put the number in the thousands. 4 months later, Indira Gandhi was assassinated by 2 of her Sikh bodyguards. Indian citizens launched retaliatory attacks, which turned into pogroms, killing by some estimates 17,000 Sikhs. On June 23, 1985, Air India Flight 182 was blown up by a bomb while off the coast of Ireland, killing all 329 people aboard, including 268 Canadian citizens. Another bomb went off at an airport in Tokyo, which was intended for Air India Flight 301, but instead killed 2 baggage handlers. The bombings were tied back to a Canadian-based Sikh separatist group who wanted revenge for Operation Blue Star. Over the 80s and into the early 90s, Punjab was marred by fighting, claiming the lives of 30,000 people, due to the crackdown by the Indian state and the disillusionment of Sikhs with the militant part of the movement. By the mid-90s, the militarized arm of the Khalistan movement had almost entirely died, as did its political legitimacy. This is the context into which Hardeep Singh Nijjar was born. Growing up in the 80s, Nijjar's family gave shelter to Sikh militants, who passed on some of their beliefs. Whether he carried on those militant beliefs is a subject of debate. India has long claimed Nijjar as a violent terrorist. He was arrested in India in 1995 as an associate of extremists who murdered an Indian politician in a bombing. He's been accused of being behind a cinema bombing in India, of leading a militant group called the Khalistan Tiger Force, and of training militants and stockpiling weapons in a remote part of BC. There is no tangible evidence to support this. Many of these accusations came from individuals who were tortured while in Indian custody. Regardless, the RCMP investigated Nijjar on numerous occasions, interviewing him at least 3 times, but never laid charges. If he's guilty of the things India has accused him of, there's not enough credible evidence to prove it. The most credible threat Nijjar posed was existential. He took over the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara in part to reinvigorate support for Khalistan, which had largely been taboo in Canada since the Air India bombing. He hung pictures of martyrs of the movement around the temple. At the time of his death, Nijjar and his friend and lawyer Gurpatwant Singh Panan were organizing a non-binding global referendum in favor of establishing Khalistan. But none of that makes him a terrorist, and all of it, whether you agree with the movement or not, is protected under Canadian free speech laws. Yet, these beliefs were enough to motivate his murder. The Bishnoi Gang, a terrorist group in Canada, has taken credit. The question is, were they working at the direction of the Indian government? Investigations by the RCMP and CSIS determined that 2 employees at the Indian consulate in Vancouver were using coercion and bribes to manipulate Indian nationals in Surrey to survey and pass on information about Nijjar. Those consulate employees then passed that information on to members of Indian intelligence back in New Delhi, which likely made its way as high as India's Minister of External Affairs. Those intelligence officers back in India then communicated with the Bishnoi gang to facilitate the hit. An American indictment offers even more compelling evidence. Indian intelligence tried to organize the murder of Nijjar's New York-based lawyer, Mr. Panan, but ended up communicating with an undercover FBI agent instead. At one point, they forwarded the FBI agent a video of Nijjar shortly after he had been murdered, saying he was one of many targets. The Indian government said this was the work of a rogue agent, but both American and Canadian intelligence have come to the conclusion that India was behind the murder of Mr. Nijjar and attempted murder of Mr. Panan. But if those two men didn't offer any real credible threat to India, why go through the trouble of risking a diplomatic incident to murder citizens of another country? For Modi's Hindu nationalist government, doing so was part of a broader effort to create a boogeyman out of the memory of the Khalistan movement. In 2020, Indian farmers began a massive protest after a set of laws passed that removed the price floor on crops. The government labeled them secessionists, Khalistanis, even jihadists. But the scapegoating didn't work. The protests raged on for over a year, and the BJP eventually reversed the legislation, marking perhaps their biggest defeat since taking office. Shortly after, a man named Hardeep Singh started touring Punjab, gathering support for a renewed separatist movement. He raided a police station and freed one of his aides who was held there. In response, Modi turned Punjab into a police state, arresting more than 300 people, including Hardeep Singh. By arresting Singh at home and attempting to murder figures like Nijjar and Panan abroad, the BJP could create a broader illusion that India's national security was threatened by a renewed, violent Khalistan movement. By crushing the movement through force, they could win political support heading into the 2024 election. Yet the irony in India is that by labeling farmers as secessionists and jailing or murdering Sikh separatists at home and abroad, they may have facilitated new interest in the movement. Modi's political scapegoating and strong-arming didn't work this time. The BJP lost their majority in the 2024 election. Meanwhile, thousands of people showed up around the world to vote in the non-binding Khalistan referendum. Hardeep Singh himself was elected to parliament, winning twice as many votes as his next opponent. Backdropping all of this is that many of the same issues that led to the turmoil of the 1980s and the massive protests in 2020 still exist in India. And whether it is a legitimate threat or not, the protection of freedom of speech laws has allowed pro-Khalistan sentiment to grow internationally, particularly in Canada, which has the world's second largest Sikh population. The trial for the 4 men who are accused of killing Nijjar is set to begin soon, but things have changed significantly since he was killed. At the time, Trudeau spoke openly about India's involvement with the murder. The relationship between Trudeau and Modi had never been good, but the accusations destroyed any remaining diplomatic goodwill. After all, Canadian intelligence had been reporting for some time about India's foreign interference. Although the murder of Nijjar was a dramatic escalation, India has and continues to attempt to influence Canadian politicians, fund or interfere in election campaigns, or coerce or intimidate Indo-Canadians. But now, the diplomatic relationship with India is far more important than it was even a year ago. In March 2026, Prime Minister Mark Carney went to Mumbai and New Delhi to reset diplomatic relations, and Carney and Modi released a series of memorandums of understanding surrounding new partnerships between the two countries, as well as a multi-billion-dollar trade deal. India is set to become an increasingly important trade partner. How Canada navigates Nijjar's criminal trial could have significant impacts on the relationship with India, but also the government's relationship with the substantial Sikh population in the country. Recently, the Canadian Justice Department requested permission to withhold sensitive information from the murder trial, arguing it, quote, would be injurious to international relations and national security. This information, it's pretty safe to assume, has to do with the specific involvement of Indian officials in Nijjar's murder. Sikh activist groups were outraged, saying that Canada is putting economic concerns ahead of security ones, and that concealing evidence denies justice for the Nijjar family and the Sikh community. Before Carney's trip to India, a senior government official said Ottawa no longer believes India is continuing to interfere in Canada's domestic politics, a statement that was refuted by other Liberal cabinet members. But shaking hands with Modi and stating that India is no longer involved in foreign interference doesn't make it true. A recent CSIS report stated that India was one of the main perpetrators of foreign interference and espionage. India has denied any involvement in foreign interference, despite the evidence, which makes it increasingly difficult to believe anything has changed. If India is not held accountable for its role in Nijjar's murder, does it further embolden them to facilitate other acts of violence in Canada? It's not inconceivable to imagine they could target political figures in the future, or other prominent members of communities they deem to be working against India's best interests. Yet, Canada's economic relationship with India is not insignificant either. India is the world's fastest growing economy, and its developments in energy, critical minerals, infrastructure, digital industries, agriculture, and education all offer opportunities for Canadian exports of goods and services. The two countries are looking to double two-way trade to $70 billion a year by 2030. In a time of economic uncertainty, that partnership is important to Canada's economic future. Trump's global tariffs have made the political balancing act between Canada, India, and Indo-Canadians more precarious than ever. No matter how Hardeep Singh Nijjar's murder trial plays out, some part of that triangle of relationships will be damaged. Canada's government has to decide which outcome it is willing to live with: justice for Nijjar and the Sikh community, but a damaged relationship with a crucial trade partner, or prosecute the four men responsible, obscure India's involvement, and hope it doesn't embolden a foreign power to carry out more violence against Canadians on Canadian soil. That's the video. Thanks so much for watching. If you like content like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. Special thank you as always to everyone over at Patreon. If you want to support independent Canadian content like this, you can do that over at Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks so much.